if you would this morning, open your Bibles with me to chapter 46. And this is going to be fun because we're going to get to do two chapters, because 46 is full of names that I'm not going to pronounce because I don't want to torture you. Amen. Glad you appreciate that. But we'll begin in 46 because in chapter 46, we see such an awesome event in the first part of chapter 46. So Israel set out with all that he has, that was his, and when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said to him, "Jacob, Jacob." And I find it's interesting because sometimes God is calling him Israel, and sometimes God is calling him Jacob. I don't know if you guys have pet names, and I know that God works differently. And just like your mother or father would have called you, if your name is Charlie, he might say Charles when he's serious, or he may, "Hey, Charlie, come here," at times. And I don't know if God is doing that with this incident, but at this point he's calling him Jacob, and he says, "Here am I." And he replied, and he said, "I am God, the God of your father," he said. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there, and I will go down with you to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again, as Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where someone is actually dying. I was there when my father died, and I've been at the bedside of a few people that died. And oftentimes, to get more oxygen, their mouths are open and their eyes are open, and when they die, their eyes are open and their mouth's open, and you want to close their mouth and close their eyes with your hand, and I've done that. And so he's promised that he's going to go down to Egypt with Jacob. Now, this is important for you and I to get, because have you ever had God impress on you something not to do? And then he says at one point, "Go and do that." It's almost like maybe you were brought up with the idea of, son, stay out of those bars, those saloons, and people warn you, and then sometime you're praying to God and you're asking him to lead you by his Spirit and give you a divine appointment, and he says, "Go into that bar right there." And you suck air, you go, "Oh, surely not," and you have a hard time getting over something that's been entrenched in you, and maybe it's been your parents or some wise person that's spoken into your life that you respect, and so you've kind of avoided different things, and now God is suddenly telling you to go do something that he has kind of used other people to, tell you not to do. And so I don't know, I'm reaching for examples this morning. But if you remember that Abraham, when there was a famine, he went down into Egypt and he got into trouble. And he told his wife to lie about, "Don't tell him you're my wife, tell him you're my sister." And Abimelech, was going to take her in. And God, showed up and says, "Don't do it." And he made all of his harem sterile so they couldn't have children, and warned them sternly and said that Abraham is a prophet, and the only way that you're going to have children is to have him pray for you, because this is his wife. And he goes, "Well, I didn't know, I was innocent." And he goes to Abraham, he says, "What have you done to me?" And he says, "Well, she really technically is my sister, or at least my half-sister," and he's working around that, and so he has God's protection when he thinks he's got to protect himself, and he goes down into Egypt, and he gets into trouble, and he picks up a handmaiden, and he has a son because he's not getting the son that he's wanting and that he's, seeking God about, and so he's going to make it happen himself, and he marries Hagar. He takes Hagar to be his own, Sarah's handmaiden, and has Ishmael. And he is kind of going to pay for that. He's going to pay for that. And God's going to tell him later, "I want you to put Ishmael away and send him off and listen to your wife." That's always hard to hear, isn't it? God telling you, "Don't listen to your wife." I'm just joking there, by the way. But it's always hard when God tells you to do something that is kind of against your nature when you have your own thoughts. And so we're watching God work here because he's going to encounter Jacob. Jacob is an old man, and his son has been sent ahead of him into Egypt, and he's been mistreated, and he's thinking, gosh, I've had a bad hand dealt me, and so now, what am I going to do? And his brothers come down, and he has this vision, of course, where his brothers are going to come and bow down, and he's, to him, and he's there, and they're bowing down, and they don't recognize him, and he's giving them food in the time of famine. And now it seems to be God's provision to send them down to Egypt during famine. It's kind of been against what God has told his father and his grandfather to do. As a matter of fact, he even goes to Isaac and tells him, don't go down to Egypt when there's a famine. I'm going to take care of you here. And so he's been raised with his grandpa and his father saying, Egypt is a bad place. Stay away, stay away. And now it seems to be God's provision for him to go down to Egypt. And so God has got to encounter him and tell him, it's okay, go down. I'm going to go with you. And that may be the case in some of our lives, I believe. And I want you to realize that he's going towards Egypt, and the last stop off, so to speak, is Beersheba. And Beersheba is kind of an interesting place, and I want you to kind of go through this quick little journey with me to chapter 21 and chapter 26. So get your bulletin out and put it in 46, because we're going to come back. And go to 21 and go to 26 and put a bulletin or a marker or do something there so that you can flip back and forth with me as we make this quick journey. And as we go to chapter 21 of Genesis, we're going to see something about Beersheba that I think is going to be interesting for us to get, because this place is going to be kind of a pivotal place in time and history for a generation of a nation of people that God is building. And I look at this and I think, I wonder if Muncie Alliance will be that. We have so many people coming and going with students and people going out and planting churches, and it's really difficult for me to let go of people. And what's your relationship, is not going to be always that way, and how's it going to work? And you're always a little bit wondering about what is God up to and how is this whole thing going to work. And we can kind of get something of what God is doing and how he's doing it if we look at chapter 21, verses 14 through 20. And there it says that early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. Now this is when Abraham was told, listen to your wife and send off the slave and her son, the slave woman and her son. And so Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar, and he set them on his shoulder and sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered through the desert of Beersheba. There it is, right there. And when the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down nearby, about a bow shot away, and she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. As she sat there nearby, she began to sob. Wouldn't it be hard to sit out your son and say, okay, I can't watch him die, I can't be near him, I can't comfort him because it's too hard on me. And so you go from here to the back of the church perhaps, and you're sobbing. And maybe he can hear you, maybe you can hear him, but they're sobbing. And God heard the boy crying. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what's the matter, Hagar? And I don't like it when God asks me questions when the answer's so obvious. What's the matter? And it's like, well, don't you know? And there's parts about God that he knows, but he's pulling stuff out of us. And here he says, what's the matter, Hagar? And he heard the boy crying, and God called out, what's the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying. Now, I don't like that either, because why didn't he say, I've heard you and your boy crying? But he is addressing her and he's ministering to her because he knows what she's feeling. And that's the part of God that I do like. He says, I've heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, and I will make him into a great nation. Well, great. That's a great promise in an air-conditioned building with plenty of food and water, and then I could really contemplate this. But right now, I'm just trying to survive past this afternoon. And don't you think that she's kind of thinking that way? It's not a good time to make such a big promise. Then God opened her eyes, and this is what I like. God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up, and he lived in the desert, and he became an archer. It's kind of neat that the God says, oh, she went about a bow shot away, and by the way, he became an archer. And his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. So it's a happy ever after kind of story for them. They think that they're going to die, that God doesn't care, that God is distant. Where is God? And suddenly a voice from heaven comes out, and it says, Hagar, what's the matter? I've heard the boy crying. And by the way, I'm going to make him into a mighty nation. And I know that that's a future promise, and you probably don't care so much about surviving past this event, but look, there's water. Take him by the hand and feed him or give him a drink of water. And isn't it interesting that there was a well there, or God made water, or he did something? I don't know. But they were sitting right next to God's provision, even though they thought they were going to die. I don't like when God does that to me, but I like it after the fact. Because I know that God sees me, he cares for me, he's made provision for me before I even get in a need. He's been there. And isn't it amazing how people give up on the brink of a miracle? And that's where I live, and that's where you live. And living with God is not just an easy thing because he's perfect and you're not, and he's all-knowing and you're not, and you are called to trust him, but you got your own ideas, but his ways are better than your ways. And how are you going to ever walk with God and know God? Well, it's through things like this. It's through things like this. Well, this is the history of Beersheba. And as we read on, then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of the force of the army there, said to Abraham, God is with you. Now swear to me by God that you're not going to deal false with me. And I think he had reason to think that Abraham might. He lied about his wife. Is this somebody you want to buy a used car from? Probably not. Don't deal falsely with me. And show me that me and the country where you are living as an alien, the same kind of kindness that I've shown you. I gave your wife back and yada yada. And Abraham said, I'll swear to it. And Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. Now Abraham's servants dug this well. And when Abimelech's guys saw it, they said, hey, that's ours. And he goes, I just dug that. It's mine. He goes, no, we're taking it. We're seizing it. And so he complains to Abimelech. And Abimelech said, I don't know who's done this. You did not tell me, and I heard about it only today. I don't know who the guys in the black hats are, but let me deal with them. So Abraham brought sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a treaty. And Abraham set apart 7 hued lambs from the flock. And Abimelech asked Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 hued lambs that you have set apart by themselves? And he replied, accept these as 7 lambs from my hand as a witness that I dug this well. If you take these lambs, you're acknowledging that this is my well, and I dug it. So the place was called Beersheba because the two swore an oath there. Why do places become significant? Events happen. There are places that seem to be blessed to bring peace, and there are places that seem to be given a place in human history where things are established and there seems to be something of honor about a place where things happen. And so it's called Beersheba. And after the treaty had been made at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, returned to the land of the Philistines, and Abraham planted a tamarisk tree. A tamarisk tree in Beersheba. It's kind of interesting when you make a treaty, you make a deal, and something is worked out. You get your well back, you make a deal with somebody that they're afraid that you might mistreat them, and they see God's blessing on you, and suddenly you're asked to join forces and have this treaty established, and they make this treaty. And what do you do as a mark for a treaty? In this case, Abraham planted a tamarisk tree. Now, in study group this week, one of the guys was looking this up, and he said this is the kind of tree that requires maintenance. And so you just don't plant a tree like this somewhere where that you're never going to return. So it's kind of a statement like this place is a place that's significant now, but I'm going to come back here because this tree is going to bring, it's going to take some maintenance, and so I'm going to plant this kind of tree. It's going to bring me back here because I know I'm going to be back here. And I think that sometimes God does that. God knows the future, and we are following a God. And honestly, when you look at this Bible, there's so much in here that's so yet to be fulfilled and futuristic. That God knows the future, and we're following Him today, and we don't even know tomorrow. But when you're following God, it requires you to acknowledge who He is and how He works, and that He is eternal and that He knows the future. So he plants a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the eternal God. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines for a long time. So he was there long enough to nurse that tree along, and he knew that there would be something that he would come back to, because this tree was going to be kind of a high-maintenance tree. And then I want to have us flip over to chapter 26 now, and we're just making a brief detour because this is in our context, and I want you to get why it was that Jacob went to Beersheba. What was the significance of it? Why didn't he do it before he left? Why didn't he get assurance in his heart before he left where he was, before he went towards Egypt, got to Beersheba? It's kind of on the line. This is the last stop before you leave the promised land. And if we go to chapter 26, we're going to see in verses 1 through 4 Isaac's history of Beersheba. Now there was a famine in the land besides the earlier famine that Abraham had at his time, and Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. And the Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Do not live there in the land. Live in the land where I tell you to live. Stay in this land for a while, and I will be with you and bless you." It's kind of like, almost like factories close in a town and it's almost ready to dry up, and God says, "Stay there and I'm going to be with you." And you think the whole economy of the town is going to be affected. But God tells you to stay there, and you say, "I got to get work." Is it really important to chase what you think, or is it better to follow the one who knows the future? And so Isaac kind of drilled into his son, Jacob, this is what God did, and this is what happened to your granddad when he went, in fear of not having enough, he went down to Egypt, and this is what happened to him. And now this is what happened to me. I was ready to go to Egypt just like my dad, and God says, "Stop, don't go. I'm going to be with you where you are." But the unemployment's so high, and I can't, it's like, I'm going to be with you. And I think that's really the most important thing is like, what if God says to you, "I'm going to be with you"? It's like every need that you have, that you could possibly have, is going to be met because God is with you. And it doesn't matter where you are or even what you're doing. I've had a few years of not being a pastor, and I went through an identity crisis, and because I didn't even know coffee so much at the time, and I wasn't in business, and I was working for minimum wage, driving around, picking up blood and urine, and wondering who I was and missing the whole concept of, Lord, I'm called to be great. You know, the harvest is plentiful and the labors are few, and I'm on the back burner. It was just before I came here. And yet, God was with me. And during that time, I was pressing into God, and I was learning some things that God wanted to put into my life before He even brought me here. And He knows the future, and I didn't. It was going to be rough here, and so God had to teach me some things and prepare me. And I had to learn about my own failures. I had to learn about my own weakness so that I would count on Him. Maybe you're finding your place, and you say, well, there's no job, there's no, whatever my provision is. And God says, just stay there, and I'm going to make you into something that you're not. And so he stayed, and he says, and I will give all this land to you and confirm the oath that I swore to your father Abraham, and I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky, and I'll give them this land throughout their offspring, and all the nations of the earth was going to be blessed if you just stay put. Well, that's a big promise, and it's too far in the future for me to care about now. Anybody ever tell God that kind of stuff? I know I'm odd. I must be the only one. But I think a lot of us are a lot alike, are we not? And then I look at this, and I want to skip down to verse 23. Because after that, we're going to see something else that God is up to here. And I guess we could start with 19. Isaac's servants dug a well in the valley and discovered a well of fresh water there. Now, I don't know if this is the one that the angel pointed out from heaven. I don't know. But it's kind of interesting that your provision in the desert is there, and God knows it's there. And lift up your eyes, there's water, and your future is now alive suddenly. And they discover fresh water there, but the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with the herdsmen and said, this water's ours. So he named this well Esek, because they disputed with him, and they dug another well, but they quarreled over this one too. So he named it Sitnah. And he moved on from there, and he dug another well, and no one quarreled it, and he named that place Rehoboth, saying, now the Lord has given us room and a well to flourish in this land. So now we pick up with 23, and we find these words. From there he went to Beersheba. That night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and will increase the number of your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. I like your dad, so I'm going to bless you. Okay. Isaac built an altar there and called on the name of the Lord. There he pitched his tent, and there his servants dug a well. Meanwhile, Abraham had come to him from Gerar, and what have you come? And here's Abimelech. Abimelech came to him and says, "Why have you come here? You kicked me out. You said there's not enough room. Go away." And Isaac asked him, "Why have you come here since you were so hostile and sent me away?" Then he answered and he said, "We saw clearly that the Lord was with you, so we said, there ought to be a sworn agreement between you and us and you, and let us make a treaty with you so that you will do us no harm, just as we did not molest you, nor..." and he, of course, he lied about his wife instead of his sister too. The same Abimelech, I think. Gosh, you're thinking, this family is really in trouble. They cannot be trusted to do what they say. And now we are, and now you are blessed by the Lord. And we know the Lord's blessing you, and we don't know why He's blessing you, because you're a lying idiot. That's what I'm thinking He's thinking, but He's not saying it. Do you ever wonder what people think about you, really? No, don't think about that. And Isaac made a feast for them, and they ate and they drank. And early the next morning, the men who swore an oath to each other, then Isaac sent them on their way, and they left him in peace. That day, Isaac's servant came and told him about the well. Now, this is the well that they had filled up. Maybe I think that he's redigging these wells. And he says, we found water, and he called it Sheba. And to this day, it's the name of the town has been Beersheba. Oh, there's how that name came into being, too. When Esau was 40 years old, he married this woman, and, well, that's not important, I guess, to our text, so I'm not going to go there. So God has made this special place. It was a special place for Abraham to make a covenant. He plants a tamarisk tree there that's going to require maintenance, and he stays there a while. But he's going to keep coming back to that place, his family. It's a place that's significant for God's blessing on his family. And then Isaac comes, and he's there in Beersheba, and he makes a treaty with Abimelech. And so this place is kind of interesting. And now, go back to chapter 46, because in chapter 46 is where we are today. This is a point in time in history that God chooses this same place. And he says to Jacob, and so Israel, it's called Israel here, sent out, and he reached Beersheba, and there he offered sacrifices to God of his father Isaac. Now this is where you met Dad. Now I think this is interesting because there's some family history here. And do you ever think, why is God, where does it matter? Didn't God know where he was, that he could have sacrificed to God? Yeah. But do you think God ever knows what your need is, and that God has made a promise to you and your father and your grandfather? And isn't it almost for you that God takes you to a significant place so that while you're in the significant place, you're reflecting? And suddenly the reflection is causing you to remember a promise that God has made in your family line. It was made it to your grandfather, made it to your father, and now you're there. And this is the exact place that Abraham got in trouble, made a treaty, and God met him there. This is the place where Isaac met God and said, don't go down to Egypt. And now you're going down to Egypt, and you've been taught not to go to Egypt when trouble hits. And you get to that very significant place in time, and you get to that place and say, I'm not going to go. And I'm sure maybe God doesn't want me to, and I'm going to just check with God before I leave the promised land here. And God meets him, and I like this. And he said to God, and I like this, because maybe he's just going to offer sacrifice. Maybe God was just going to be quiet. You ever pray to God and he doesn't say anything? I all the time. I like it when he says stuff. Most of the time. Even when it's a rebuke, it feels good to hear his voice, doesn't it? And it's better even when he makes promises and says, you're my son, I really love you. It's like, I like those times. But every time, and I don't know that he really expected God to speak to him. I think it was more for him to reflect that God met his grandfather and his father, and he's in a lineage of promises that God made to Abraham, passed on to Isaac, and now you're next in line to get this blessing. And you're praying to God, and you're offering sacrifice, and maybe you don't expect God to even talk to you, and suddenly God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said, Jacob, Jacob. It's interesting he's calling him Israel because that's his new promised name. I'm going to make a nation called Israel out of you. And he knows his other name is Jacob, and he says, Jacob, and he says, here am I. He says, I am the God of your father. He said, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. I know you've been taught not to go to Egypt when trouble hits, but don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. For I will make you a great nation there. And that's why I'm calling you Israel. The nation's going to be called Israel. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again, and at Joseph's own hand will close your eyes when you die. So now, I was in prayer meeting today, and we were doing individual prayer, and Dean got stuck with me, and I got stuck with Dean in prayer. And as I prayed for him, I just felt like he's at a pivotal point. He's just kind of retired. He's retired his sell-off part of the business. He's still there and working, but now his children are married, and he's becoming a grandfather, and I've met some of the grandkids, and it's really fun to watch this whole family. And And you think of a family in history and how God picks you out to start something that's going to continue on down the line. You think about that, and I just prayed for him. I said, God, give Dean your perspective, because he's at a new point in his life. He's sort of retired, and he's a grandfather, and he's at a new place. He's been coming to church here for a few years, and we were gleaning from a lot of his business wisdom at Alliance World Coffee and Vecinos and all of our companies at the church. And he began to say to me, he said, I know God's made some promises to you. And he said, I think you're an anxious person. And I said, yes, I am. He said, but I think God is going to fulfill his promises, and we may not get to see them. And he began to talk about his grandkids, and that he's hoping that they're going to be in the faith, and that God's going to start something in his family that's going to go on and on and on, because it's an eternal God making an eternal promise to you and to me. God has picked us, and he doesn't have to. He could have found more capable people, I'm sure. But God likes to choose the weak to confound the wise, and we accept that we are chosen. And we don't understand it all, and I really don't. But I feel chosen, and Dean feels chosen, and I'm thinking, we're following an eternal God, and he's even thinking of what's going to happen in the future as he makes a promise today. And Dean and I were just kind of in that moment in time, and this brought a lot of insight for today's message for me, that we're this eternal being that God's chosen now, and he knows the future, and he's getting us ready, and he's planning and setting things in order like dominoes, and you just push one over and they just start going like this, and great things happen. And you begin to realize, as you're trusting God, that God knows the future, and he's preparing you now for the future, and he's making promises now. And I like this because he's telling Jacob, I'm going to make you a mighty nation. But you're going to die, and your son's going to close your eyes. You're not going to see it. Thanks. And I think part of the reason is that, we're ready to launch some interns. We're praying that God will direct us, and we're at the mercy of God, and he knows the future. And Josh Lindstrom is praying about where to go, and we would have loved to have him even on staff here, and we have a limited budget, and we always want to be connected with these people. I don't want to let them go. I want to go with them, And God's eternal, and so this is kind of interesting. And we've got this offer where other districts have asking for our help, and start a roasting company here and start an internship and whatever, and so we're praying that God will do some of this crazy stuff, that he knows the future ahead of us. And how are we ever going to get there? We don't know, except to trust God. And Grant Butler is praying about going to, the Northwest. And, you got to be called to God to live there. It's cloudy and rainy. And he says, I don't really want to go there, but I feel like I'm supposed to go there, and I don't know what to do. And so we're talking to that district, and they're really excited, and we're going to have a conference call, and it's really exciting. Did and I was so pleased that here's a guy that went through our internship, is a current roaster, and he wants to stay with our movement and start a roasting company somewhere else with an internship. And this is what Josh would want to do too, I hope, and we're at least talking about it. And then I think about the stacked deck and the promises that God's made. The right people at the right time stirred to do the right things to build my church. He's going to put a church here for the world. Yeah, right. But as we spread out, and God looks at us as a group of people that's sparked something bigger than ourselves. And I may never get to see it. But today, my obedience to God about the promise is very important for me to walk in that perspective. I think of Adam, and he taught Wednesday night. Did just a wonderful job. And he's taught Sunday morning. He's done some really awesome things. And it ministered to me so deeply Wednesday night. And I'm looking at the people that God is raising up currently. I look out, and we the 6 or 7 churches and the missionaries here and there and abroad. But even now, God is doing some amazing things. And I hope you feel the sense of honor of God's presence to bring people here at the right time that He's going to be launching out of us. Are you feeling a little bit of that? Because I think that's what our text is about today. And I'm feeling a sense of awe that we're in God's purpose and in God's plan. And I love it. And I hate it. Because I got to grow and change and get God's perspective. I can't walk with my own understanding. I've got my own desires for Josh and Grant. And I got my own desires and my own plans for, Caleb. Caleb's raising coffee that we could buy now. And he learned about coffee here. He quit Purdue University to join our internship. And now God is... And you get to see the effect that you have in a short block of time with history and time. And part of the thing that I'm really getting today is that God could not reward the Apostle Paul or Peter or any of the people in the Bible, because you and I are learning from that, applying and gaining insight and promise from listening to their story and their writings. And it's going to take to the end of time for Paul to reap the rewards that you and I are going to add to his promise. Do you know that you're eternal? Do you know that God has apprehended you and that you are significant? You don't feel significant now. I don't feel that great significance. Sometimes I get a glimpse of it. Do you ever think that your obedience or disobedience is going to affect the future generations because of the impact and the footprint that you make on people? You ever think about that? And yet God calls you to step out in faith. You get a promise and you believe it, and He asks you to take a risk. How's this ever going to... I don't know, but... And that's been evident to us here, and to you, I hope, as we live life together. Your life joining with our lives as corporate God building His church all comes into play, and we have this magnificent promise given to us from God. And we don't know that we'll ever see I don't know that I would like to see more. I want to see 4 or 5 internships across the nation here and some overseas in bases. And I have a vision for that. I want to see that. Part of me is I want to see God make good His promise that I can't make happen. So whenever we get the Reeves here and we get home group leaders here that are encouraging people when you go to work and God opens the door, that's a significant eternal period of divine appointment. That matters. That matters. And you and I get to live following the eternal God in the present day. The life experience and the promises and the perspective that you and I have as we launch forward into the future about His promise. And He says, I'm going to make you a mighty nation there. You're never going to see it. Or just going to close your eyes. You're going to die. And then it says to Jacob, then Jacob left Beersheba and Israel's sons and took their father Jacob and their children and their wives and their carts that Pharaoh had sent to transport them back to Egypt, and their livestock and their possessions and all that they acquired in Canaan. And Jacob and all of his offspring went to Egypt. And he took with him to Egypt his sons and grandsons and his daughters and granddaughters and his offspring. And here's a list of them. Read those yourself when you don't have to laugh at the way you're pronouncing them. And here's the offspring, from this wife and from this wife, Leah, and to Rachel, and to their handmaidens and their children that they have. And here they are. They number, 66 persons, with the 2 sons who had been given to them in verse 27, been born to Joseph in Egypt. The numbers of Jacob's family that went to Egypt were 77 in all, or there were 70 in all. That's not all of them. It doesn't even count. There's a lot of things, and you get into Acts and Hebrews where it recounts this, and some say 75, and so it's how you break it down and count them. And it's all important to God. That's why he put it into his word. And Jacob sent for Judah ahead of him to Joseph to get directions to Goshen. Now, if you're from Indiana, you know that people up north speak different accent. Goshen, okay? And they had arrived in the region of Goshen. Joseph had made his chariot ready, and he went down to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. There's our story again at the airport. You haven't seen somebody, and you see him, and your emotions take over. You hug somebody and you weep. And it's such an intimate, loving way to respond at times. Then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go speak to Pharaoh and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who are living here in the land of Canaan have come to me. So Joseph tells his brothers, hey, I'm going to go intercede on behalf of you to who's in charge. And we see the ministry of Jesus, that we have an intercessor who knows you, who made you. He knows your weaknesses, and he knows how to intercede. And he goes to God the Father on your behalf. And right now, he's before the throne of God saying, this child of mine has weaknesses, and they have strengths, but I want you to know that they're mine, and I'm going to go on behalf of them, that you bless them with your favor in this capacity. And so Joseph is serving as an intercessor to Pharaoh, and he's making a way for his family to go. And he says, now when you meet Pharaoh, tell him that you've tended livestock your whole lives. And he said, and then they'll settle you in the region of Goshen, for all shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians. Now this is my family, they're shepherds. And they go, oh, those shepherd types. You know, I don't know what I could say and how I could socially break that down for us, but not such a pleasant thing. But what God does in this, and this is so amazing to me, because first of all, this Pharaoh has livestock. He said, hey, by the way, if any of them has special talents, here's my flocks. Because he knows God is with his family. But he said, I want them to, have this space, because Egyptians kind of look down on your type. And so I'm going to put you off in Goshen where there aren't a lot of Egyptians, and you won't have a lot of shame to bear. And I'm going to take you down there. And I think this is important because God is out to preserve something. He's out to preserve the culture, and he's out to preserve their family lineage so that they're not marrying into the Egyptians. And so a special place is prepared in this strange land. And God is going to go down there with them. He's going to build a mighty nation. He's going to give them space so that they can grow as a nation, and they can marry them and stay in the family lineage, and that they are going to be somehow separated from the Egyptians, but there in their blessing. And that's what we are in the world. We have this kind of concept, and Egypt is the world to us, and in many ways, because this is not our home. But God is with us. And everything we need to follow God in this foreign land that we're now living, that we're just passing through on our way to heaven. And this is not our home. Our real citizenship is in heaven. And we live in this tension of living here, but living beyond here. Are you with me? And there's something I want you to glean from that, because this is the place and time that you and I must understand that we are called and we're citizens in heaven, and that God has interceded, Jesus is interceding, and things are happening for his purposes, and he's making a place for us, even though we're in this sucky world. And you can listen, and I've been listening to people on how bad this world is and how it's going to just tear up your kids and all this. It's like, no, God is with you. Be confident. Be confident as God is with you. And I'm going to close there, and I'm not going to get into the next chapter. So I'm going to bring the worship band up, and I want us to have a sense of God's presence. And I would love for the Lord to minister to you in some kind of neat, special way here. As we stand together, will you let me pray for you? And Lord, we pray to you because you know the future. We never saw the Reeves' going out. We never saw the plan that you had for them, but we rejoice that you are a God who knows and prepares and launches and sends and equips us for periods of time and launches us out. And Lord, as you send us out into this world, the places that we work, the places that we're going to have lunch today, would you be with us? And could we feel a sense of the confidence of your presence as we go? That we're under your care and under your hand. We pray. Amen. Shall we sing together?
You are God.
I just have a really fun little thing to end with. I'm going to bless you with something that I feel like I'm supposed to by the Lord. That's the only way it works anyway. But this Wednesday night, there's a guy named Michael O'Reilly. O'Reilly? Do you know him? No. He came to Ball State, and he came to party. And he said, the first week I'm there, I have a dream. And I'm connected to a community. And it's a loving community. And the emphasis is on everything that I'm going to gain in this community. And so he said he saw some literature about InterVarsity. And so he went there and he came to party. And he wants to, well, I don't know what he wanted to do. But he got involved there and he came to church here. And he said, this is the community. He said, I'm now gone. And I'm going to medical school. And he blew in and he sat down at my table. And he said, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I feel good about it. I'm studying for medicine. And later, I said, well, let's just talk after the service. And he said he wanted me to pray for him. And I said, okay. And he said, I want you to know that I had this dream. And this is the community. And my life was transformed here. And I wasn't looking for God. And he gave me a dream. And does that sound familiar? Dan had the thing. And when I was in Iraq a year and a half ago, teaching pastors that were going to plant churches. There were 20 pastors there learning to plant churches in Iraq. And you know that many of them had dreams from God that had never had a human witness. And, by the way, they were watching Sat 7. And I got to see Sat 7 in Iraq. And I said, oh, I know all about them. And I said, we got a team over there doing that. And they said, oh, really? That's, you know. And I'm just thinking how dimensional God is when he finds a group of people. And I'm going to pray this for you. I'm going to ask God to give you a dream or a vision of significance that you can know what you're supposed to do. Because it's way beyond you anyway. So I'm going to pray this over you at the end. Can I do that? Anybody open for this? That you want this? Yeah, just put out your hands and just receive it from the Lord. And I don't mean to be real charismatic, but put out your hands. Lord, see these hands, and I pray a rich blessing that you want this more than we do, that you've apprehended us, you've called us, and you've made us significant in your kingdom. Would you give us visions and revelation of how you want to use us? Blow our minds beyond what we ask and what we think. Would you work? And I bless you with that knowledge. Amen.